The spell is depends on how you spell gentle.
Because I think of what we came up with.
Yeah. So it doesn't include some of the things that are marked.
You can have some choice others, but it doesn't need to.
We've got, yes.
We're on our
Okay.
2011.
Yeah.
2011 delegates call.
Well, anyway.
No, it's like $12. We only have 30 minutes to give them out. Or we're going to take 5 minutes off.
I'm closer to
Well, you're in the right spot for the ring.
I don't know which was.
Still download.
Oh, this is.
Well, if I should give you one of these, and I'll be you might as well.
5-minute penalty. Hey, it's almost 15%.
Where is
15%?
Yes. Yes,
No,
it's 1 o'clock.
Internet connection is low.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. We have lots of stuff to get through. There are 14 motions on the advanced agenda, only one of which was submitted by the rules, rating by the Rules Committee.
There you go.
For most of them, unfortunately, I failed to even list 2 of them to the committee. Most of them I got some of the committee's response. So we need to move quickly, if we can, and get through these. We start on your delegates call, page 21. There we go. Okay, we're on 16. Page 21, ADM 1130 by Mike Akrams. Proposed change chapter 11 blitz rules. There's 4 blitz rule changes to make it simpler and less confusing. Since blitz is played with a separate set of rules, blitz should be only 5-0. 5 minutes with no delay. Game 6 to 29 is quick chess and played under quick rules. Right now, game 10 could be both blitz or quick chess, and this confusion doesn't have to happen. By the way, I'm taking it under advisement. I'll probably change that to game 9. Okay, the committee voted 2 to 3 against on that change. I find it far too restrictive to have only 5-0. That's why I voted against it. Okay. I'd like a feeling of this group. Right now the rule is, under the blitz rules is game 1 to game 10, with game 5 and above being radio. Okay. And I think we can just modify that to game 9 without too much difficulty. But the game 1, right now it's game 1 to game 10 under blitz rules. It also allows increment and or delay as long as the total time is less than 10 minutes. FIDE, I understand, is going to, or has gone to game 3, increment 2. Okay, so, which to me, increment and delay, and to almost everybody else, increment and delay isn't blitz. I agree with that. Okay. So, that's where we stand on it. Is there any comments or discussion? Okay. All in favor of this motion? 3, 4. All opposed? 1, 2, 3. And who doesn't care?
Where's the major motion? We didn't have to do that.
4, 5. Okay.
Apathy reigns.
So if I add the workshop and the committee together, I get
That's 8 feet.
6 to 6.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute, some of you are voting twice.
That is all right.
Yes, that's true.
I'm sorry.
From an implementing point of view, if this is passed, we will probably have to ask whether or not the event was played under blitz rules or quick chess rules, because we may need that information in the future, such as if an appeal is filed.
Well, actually, if this passes, it'll be clear by the time control.
Yeah, well, we already know we're going to have to ask more information about time tables.
Yes.
We're going to have to ask both minutes and
And
subjects.
delays, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. ADM 1131, Ken Ballou. Modify, it still isn't coming up on the screen. But anyway, modify blitz
Should be
rule.
getting closer.
It's not still,
Scroll up.
not working.
Okay.
All right.
Best laid plans.
Yes. Modify blitz rule 7D, inserting the phrase provided the player, okay, 7D is the rule on you lose if you make an illegal move. Providing the player has sufficient mating material as defined in rule 7C, at the end of the last statement. Okay, if I only have a knight and I check my opponent and he doesn't move his king, does he lose? According to the current rule, he loses. Okay. We had some discussion with this. There really wasn't anything in here other than there's a little bit in the rationale of what to do if that happens. Okay. If he has insufficient mating material and he leaves his king in check, the game should be over. Okay, what's the result?
He's a draw.
It's a draw. Okay, that I'm taking to understand as part of the motion. Is that correct, Ken?
Yes, but the purpose for this is simply that the rules are inconsistent, because if you read Rule 8C,
Yeah.
in the situation you just described, 8C says the game is a draw. 7C says the player who made the illegal move lost. You've got two rules that give you an
No,
inconsistent.
8C is both sides with insufficient material. I mean, the other player could have a queen on board.
But this is both flags down, isn't it? We're talking.
No, this is the illegal move. This is
Illegal move.
7D says the player,
Oh, legal move, okay, I see.
but what does 8C say?
8C,
I mean,
8,
but your motion says 8
if my motion says 8D, then I mean 8D
I
actually.
thought you.
I
so
don't know.
8, yeah. Oh, see, this 8D says, if one player has insufficient mating material when the opponent's flag falls or makes an illegal move, then it's a draw.
Right.
Oh, okay, so it's inconsistent.
7D is saying that if the opponent made an illegal move,
He loses.
win. Right.
Okay, gotcha. Anyway, the committee voted in favor, 4-1. And I strongly agree with it. Let's see a show of hands, all in favor? (14) opposed? 0? Okay. I don't think we'll have any problem. All right. ADM 1132. There is currently in the USCF blitz rules a rule that seems oddly out of place related to blitz. I don't quite agree, but we'll continue. Current USCF, each player must press the clock with the same hand that moves the pieces. 4A, when passing a player may use both hands. 4B, when capturing or completing a promotion, both hands may be used if it is clear that the clock is pressed after the move is turned. I don't quite like that phrasing. Basically, it should be with the hand that moved the piece. Okay. The original WBCA 4 rule, and part of the rule submitted by the motion in 2007, I don't remember that, but anyway, each player must push the clock with the same hand he uses to move the piece. However, when capturing, only one hand may be used. Exception, during castling, a player may use both hands. Once again, except when castling. There are 6 rules now that have except when castling. Okay. The first infraction will get a warning, the second, a 1-minute penalty, and the third will result in a loss of the game. Committee ruled in favor of 4-1, with me the only dissenting vote. And the only reason I dissented was that why is castling accepted? Okay. Either all of them should be allowed or none of them, in my opinion. Okay. And we can go from there. Yes, Seth.
Thank you. FIDE rules for blitz don't allow for the use of 2 hands for anything. It's 1 hand, and I think
hand, period.
it's 1 hand period, and I think we should be. I think we should maintain that.
Okay. Can you strike except when castling?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a friendly amendment. Great.
That would make the committee vote 5-0.
That'll make the vote 5-0. Committee vote is 5-0. Okay? Yes, Walter.
Which way is the penalty, by the way?
Huh?
Which way is the penalty?
The penalty is to add a minute to the opponent's clock.
But if the guy's trying to do this, keep adding a time when the guy's just trying to make time control, seems the odd way of doing it.
Well, that's a standard penalty for most technical errors in blitz chess anyway.
But I've seen it where the guy isn't using the same hand, and without him being deducted, it's not much of a penalty.
Yeah.
Well, it's only.
Well, the third time does it,
Once.
it's forfeit.
Maybe it's the first
Only
time,
get the penalty
and
once.
the second time forfeit.
Maybe.
First time warning, penalty, third time forfeit.
Yeah, in fact, can we just strike the sentence about penalty because it's already stated in other rules?
Yeah, I don't think that was part of my idea for the again. It was just to use 1 hand.
Yeah, just use 1 hand. So we'll strike the sentence that says first infraction will get a warning, etc.
I mean, there are already rules covering this kind of.
There's already a rule that covers penalties. Okay. All right.
Just to get clarification, you're proposing to remove what's called current with stuff that's under the WBCA rule?
Yes.
This motion wasn't clear with the rest.
Each player must push the clock with the same hand he uses to move the pieces, period.
Yeah, when I submitted this in 2007, it was all the WBCA rules, and there were a number of compromises that it took to get out of committee, and this is one of them that I think was compromised.
Okay, so your proposal is what's below, right?
Right, at the end, yeah.
Give
Yes.
a modification.
There's a minute.
Yeah, okay. Cam?
I'm curious, at the bottom of the left column, the second sentence in the original WBCA rule number 4, also when capturing only 1 hand may be used, disappeared from your proposed text.
Each player must press the clock with the same hand that moves the pieces.
Right.
That's
And
all that's
then-
necessary.
Then the 2004 rule, after that sentence, says also when capturing, only 1 hand may be used.
Well, when it was submitted in 07, it was just as the WBCA had it, with 1 hand for capturing and castling, but then the compromise when it went to the committee for implementation.
I see. So the compromise was to take that out.
Yeah, the committee at the time had determined that any time 2 pieces were handled within a move, 2 hands could be used.
But now we're trying to align.
But now we're trying to eliminate that to get the mess off the board. Okay. And like I always said, the only reason I objected to it should be all or nothing. And I'm perfectly willing to live with nothing.
Right, but then the question is, do you want to specifically state that you can only use 1 hand
While castling,
when capturing and when castling?
do you want to specifically state that?
Yeah. You could say
That only 1 hand is to be used when making any move?
Yeah, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I can add that. Okay, here's one that I didn't send to the committee.
Did we vote?
Oh, we voted, the committee voted, wait a minute, no, we didn't vote here on that. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And opposed? 0. Okay. ADM 1134, Brian Mottershead. Sophia rules allowed. What are Sophia rules? It is resolved that by the Board of Delegates that the USCF official rules of Webcast be amended by adding a new paragraph to the end of Rule 14B stating, draw agreements prohibited or limited, quote, Sophia rules. The rules for a tournament may prohibit draw agreements or set limits on when a draw agreement may be made. For example, the rules of a tournament may allow draws only after a certain number of moves have been made or require the consent of the tournament director for draw agreements. This variant is considered a major variant and shall suffice to announce that variant to stating in advance publicity that tournament shall use Sophia rules. Quite frankly, you can now publish, without this rule change, you can now publish any rules regarding this you want in your tournament announcement. Okay, this motion is not needed. Calling it Sophia rules, I've never heard it called that before, but so what? The committee voted against 1 to 4, primarily because it's not needed. Okay, Savanya?
Never mind, you said what I was going to say regarding that it can be put into the TLA.
Yeah, we put it in the TLA.
This is really an organizer's issue. If the organizer wants to be able to control the draw, so be it. If not, so be it.
Right.
Well, if it's just a matter of being able to put it in the TLA, it is kind of a somewhat complicated and cumbersome, bunch of restrictions, and it would seem to be, it would be easier and perhaps cheaper for the organizer if you wanted to use these rules to be able to refer to Sophia rules instead of having to say draws, not,
see such and such a website for details.
That's number one, and still, it is in the magazine, so, that does have the rules there. And also, if it's an official variation, it kind of gives it, like, the sort of the imprimatur of being an official variation as opposed to something the organizer concocted himself. It's an official variation that can be done.
But the problem with all of that is in the very motion itself is unclear about what Sophia rules actually mean. There are many variations which he lumps together and then says, I'm allowed to announce this by simply saying Sophia rules. Well, which Sophia rules? I think that's a major flaw. You can't have an announcement that says you're going to use Sophia rules, but oh, by the way, I'm not going to tell you what those mean. If you have to say, you have to say. Or he has to commit to one version of Sophia rules.
The gentleman from Wisconsin.
Yes. What magazine do they publish the Sophia rules in?
I'm saying the reference to Sophia rules would be in the TLA. That's what I was referring to when I said magazine. I don't know that there's a magazine that has a list of Sophia, quote, rules.
Yeah.
Talking about the TLA.
I will just observe that if you pass variant 14B7 eliminating all references to Sophia rules, the TLA could then just list variant 14B7 in effect.
Right. Maybe the phrase
Not
Sophia
if
rules.
variant 14B7 is still unclear about what the Sophia rules actually mean.
But I'm saying that you could modify this by striking Sophia rules in parentheses from the title. You could strike the last sentence, which is, it shall suffice to announce this variant by stating in advance publicity the tournament shall use Sophia rules. So now you have 14B7 has no mention of the words Sophia rules anywhere in it. It states about limiting draw agreements.
There is no rule 14B7 currently.
Let me use the subjunctive mood. Then Rule 14B7 would, if it were to exist, it would define.
Okay, but it would have to
and
define all the
then the
Sophia
TLA
rules.
would be able to refer to the then existing 14B7.
That's correct. We'd add another chapter to the
If only 14b7 actually told us what the rules were going to be, but it doesn't.
Yes, I disagree. It states very clear. If you drop Sophia rules,
Okay.
I think there's a hang-up on the words Sophia rules.
No, the hang-up is on the, for example, if I
Gentlemen,
do
we
this,
got a lot
that.
to do here, just arguing amongst savant.
Even in FIDE rules for both rated events and title norm events, it does not have this kind of a restriction. Yet we're looking at putting a restriction like this on, which would even carry over to our quick chess games and our blitz chess games. I just don't think this is necessary. This is like there's TD discretion. This is organizer discretion.
Yes.
If they want to implement this. Go to mychesswebsite.com, and here's what I'm saying is the Grand Poobah rules for my event.
Right. Okay, and that won't cost very much in the UTLI. All right, 1 to 4 against by the committee. All those in favor of this motion? 1. All those opposed? 15. I'm not counting abstentions.
34.
All right. ADM 1135. John Farrell and, I'm sorry, Mr. Rollins, I forgot your first name. Stephen Rollins. Okay. Virginia and Military Chess Committee. In the absence of a team scoring method in a regular tournament, whereas team members can play one another, the following is submitted as consideration to be added in the rule book. And I've already talked to Mr. Rollins about this, and he's fine with us wording it in such a way that this is a variation and would fall under that category. So we would work on the wording as far as that is concerned. However, combined individual and team tournament is 31A, and he wants to add a section for his system of verifying the team champion, of establishing the team champion. And he has a formula and an example of how to do that in the delegate's call. And basically what he's doing is adding up the place scores after tiebreak, adding up the top players from each of the teams, and determining the winner based on that place score. It seems to work very well in a military tournament where there are 4 teams and a whole bunch of players, where they have to play each other, in essence, on the same team. And that's where it stands right now. If you want to add something else to the explanation, I'd appreciate it.
This is the, like we said, this is the system that we use in the U.S. Armed Forces Open Chess Tournament. We've used it for the last 4 years very successfully, 5 years very successfully. And not just for our one, we're not the only event that this can be used for. It's good for scholastic chess. Anytime we have, if there's 4 or 5 schools and lots of kids, but only X amount want to be actually on a team, then let everybody play. What we found is when we looked in the rule book is that just all it says under combined events is make every effort not to pair people on the same team. That doesn't really give you any process on how to actually do this. This gives them a way to actually run the events and get the individual and team champion out of the same event.
Any further?
Having used that, I used it at the 2007 tournament. It worked well in determining the second and third place teams winner at the top. The one advantage to getting in the rule book is that Dad and Tom would put it in the computer system because I can do it by hand. And to do it by hand, you do a normal tiebreak. In that case, it was 1 to 62. Then the players are numbered 62, 61, 60, 59 for points, and you add up those points. And the one team had a lower score down there, and that really got penalized. Yeah.
The committee voted 2 to 3 against. The primary comment was that it's adding additional material to the rule book, which is already too big. I liked it as a variant. I think it's a little bit cumbersome, but only a little bit. I mean, they could have just went the other way and added up the place scores and have the lowest score. it's the same thing.
We had worked that out.
Yeah, we worked that out.
You know, the real issue with the military community is some of these guys have been playing each other for 30 years, so the competition just wasn't enough to say they're on the winning team. You know, we're on the same team, but we didn't play, so I'm still looking at you going, you know you can't beat me, right? You know? So we had to find a way to cut throat and who's the best guy in the room that day, and for pride's sake, who's the best team.
Right.
I think Mike makes the most salient point. Ordinarily, we don't want to just take proposals and put them in the rule book because it makes things too big. But this is a tested variant, and there is the advantage that if we do add it to the rule book, then the people who write the programs are going to be motivated to add it to them, and I think this is worthy of doing that for them.
Okay, so you're changing your vote.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Now,
3 to 2 in favor.
I happen to think that the method that's in common use for scholastic events would work just fine for these events, but that's your decision. This would also work fine. So, and as long as it's been tested, they like
It's been tested, and it's been published on the military website.
no problem.
Yeah.
Is Mike motivated?
Yes, Tim.
Can I change my committee vote?
Yeah.
Well, then it'll be 3 to 2 in favor.
No, it's 3 to 2. Ken already changed his committee vote. It'll be 4 to 1 in favor.
All right, so
Even
Ken
better.
and I are both changing our vote.
I'd like to change the other person's vote to make it 5.
Carol. No, Carol voted for. Oh, the fifth one's not here. The one that said there was too much for the rule book.
Well, we can change this vote.
All right, so you got support. Yeah.
What about us?
Huh?
You can vote among us now.
Oh, yes. All in favor?
Okay.
You were going to vote against, right? And all opposed, that's 15. 0 opposed. All right, okay. Now, we get to the motion that was actually proposed by the Rules Committee.
That'll be controversial.
Why would they do that?
Okay, the only one that was proposed by the Rules Committee. USCF Rules, now this was to take care of the situation that came up last year at the delegates meeting. A little bit preamble to that. We had voted to remove what the heck was that? Subtracting the 5 minutes, okay. So this is designed, and also to clear up, okay, one of the major problems with the rule that is currently written is that the Game 5, sudden death 16 is regular rated only. Now, nobody ever took advantage of that, but the danger is there, as was pointed out very succinctly by several people at that meeting. So this takes care of that problem as well. Also takes care of the problem that some chess clubs have 3 or 4 rounds in an evening. And by adding the delay on top of the 30 minutes for dual rating, okay, adds, in 4 rounds, adds 40 minutes to the evening. And so they might miss buses, they might, whatever. Okay, so they were always deducting the 5 minutes. So that is trying to cover both of those ends. We came up with what I think, rather than raising the limit to 29 seconds for the increment, or messing around with exceptions to various rules, or various statements in there, we just came up with a simple formula. Okay. For the purpose of rating game in minutes and increment in seconds, or delay in seconds, add minutes and seconds for total playing time for each player. Total time equals minutes plus seconds times 60. Okay, or game in 60, delay 5 is 65 minutes. 60 plus 5. Total playing time for each player. Multiple time controls, you add all of the minutes in the multiple time controls for each control. Regular only, total playing time for each player is greater than 65 minutes. Okay. Dual, both regular and quick, total playing time is from 30 to 65 minutes. Quick, total playing time for each player is less than 30 minutes, and blitz. See chapter 11, okay, giving the blitz rules. Okay. In all cases, the primary time control, that is the minutes, must be at least 5 minutes. So game 5, increment 60, or greater than 65, increment 61 is regular only. So you want to play a minute a move, okay? That's allowable. All right. Then the TD tip gives several examples, and these are only examples, and I state that. When used, the standard increment is 30 seconds, regular. Standard delay is 5 seconds, regular or dual, and 3 seconds for quick. Standard blitz uses no delay or increment, and although these are not all of the possible time controls, organizers are encouraged to select one of them. It also covers the situation that Bill Deutschberg pointed out at last year's meeting. He runs a game in 2 hours, which really should be advertised as game in 120 minutes. Okay. And as delay, which violates one of the FIDE rules. So why not just advertise the real-time control as game 115, as it is, okay, with the 5-second delay, and that solves that problem. Truth in advertising. It has one time control per tournament. You don't have to set different clocks different ways, and it's done. Okay, and we can go from there. Now, this is, in my opinion, incompatible with the next motion, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. All right. Is there any discussion along this? Yes, Ken.
Last night in discussion, the interesting question came up of game 29, delay 3, which some clubs will use now to be quick only.
And this is a question that Mike might be able to answer. Mike, say somebody wants the game 29, delay 3 to be a quick only. Can you handle that?
Make it game 26, delay 3.
All I ask is that you make it so that there is no option to the TD to pick the time control and pick the rating system.
Right.
In other words, if they pick the time control, that picks the rating system.
Game 29, quick.
Okay, so go to game 26, delay 3.
But
That would solve the problem.
your desire and Steve's desire are incompatible. There's no way to solve that
We
problem.
don't want to overlap.
I didn't actually say I have any desires.
Without one of you giving in, and I suggest that it would be easier to get you to give in than to get Steve.
Basically, we don't want overlap if we can avoid it. Okay, yes.
Yeah, I had made a suggestion on the USCF forums. One possibility is to say you only add the increment or delay time if it's more than the standard for that time. So for example, say it was G29, 3-second delay. You don't add it because 3 seconds is the standard delay for quick chess. So G29, 3-second delay would be quick rated only, whereas G29, 5-second delay, then you do add it because it's more than the default. That would be a possible way for people who are running G29 who don't want it to be dual rated. Maybe more complicated though, but.
Is it deterministic?
You're replaced by your own retard there, because if you say you can only add the delay if it is strictly greater. I know you didn't use the word strictly, but it's strictly
Different
greater
from,
than
I
the default.
think.
No, right, so G20, from particular, G25 with 5 seconds delay, you would add it because.
Agreed.
Because.
However, as soon as you say that, now what happens if you have game 115, delay 5? You can't add the delay. Well, it would count as regular.
Well, look,
regular only.
that's regular only either way, so that doesn't matter.
But you might have a game 30 delay 0, for example.
Right, so game 30 delay 0, well, that would be cool. Game 30 is
That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
D29 delay 0 would be quick.
Yes.
So, just offering you as a suggestion.
Yeah. Okay.
Just as a comment, the formula that's here and the examples that are here were the result of a lot of hammering out. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be difficult for some of us to come up with all the reasons why things came. And if you start throwing out random possibilities, it might take a while to figure it out. I think what I'm pleading for is
So get behind one proposal.
Respect for the process, that we have tried as much as possible to come up with something that's going to work for the most number of people. But we need something that we can agree to, put into the culture, and learn to use, and stop trying to find the one little example that causes a problem for somebody. You know, maybe if that causes a problem, maybe you should do that. That's like you said.
Actually, I have another comment, but if somebody else might want to speak first.
Okay, Carol.
Yeah, I wanted to know what claims you about the fact that says that these are FIDE acceptable when they're not. Is it FIDE not-
I need to scratch that because I was unaware of the FIDE rules differences.
Okay, so we're just going to close that. FIDE.
Things that were feeding.
Well, the word FIDE is
FIDE allowed,
It's vague because you're not, you know, it could be norms or it could be read, and it's two
Yeah.
different things.
I'll scratch those anyway.
115?
Most of the organizers that would use us are here anyway.
Even the standard FIDE.
Yeah, let's worry about what USCF allowed, and not worry about FIDE.
Yeah, well.
Isn't it 40, was it 49?
All right, yes.
Well,
In the 30?
This method is crystal clear,
What
and
about the
it
first?
also allows the players to know exactly what the time control is going to be, not have a director have the option to add the 2 minutes if they want. The
Right.
29 plus the 5 players do want to know. There was a situation one time where I emailed the organizer 3 or 4 times, he never would tell me if he was going to add or take off or the 5 second delay, he just never would.
Yes.
And the players wanted to know, so.
Players want to know, yes. You got another comment?
Oh, that was actually one comment is, part of Steve Dimmitt's motion, which follows, he talks about you have to advertise the delay, and that's sort of in line with the other comment I had is I guess it's a question. Under these rules, let's say that the tournament was game 25, D5. That's the way it's advertised. Player walks in the tournament with an analog clock. Can the player play, and if so, what should the clock be set to?
Game 25.
Game 25.
Oh, so, okay, so you
He's
would
being
set that.
penalized for his analog clock.
That's right.
Okay.
It is explicitly part of this proposal that players who continue to insist on showing up with analog clocks are going to have some pain.
Well, shouldn't that be in the motion then? That is,
No.
so it could be understood
The
that.
motion is as it is, and anything which is inferred.
So
You've made the correct inference.
The game is game 25.
All right.
Got an analog clock, it's game of 25.
Okay,
One-time control.
And no one has a problem with that being dual rated.
Well, I'm sure there's some.
Somebody
Well,
has
I
a
do,
problem with that.
I do, but I have a problem with anything unless in game 60 being dual rated, but that's my problem.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. From this motion, then game 25 on an analog clock is dual rated, correct?
Game 25 delayed 5 is dual
Game
rated.
25 delayed 0
Is not dual rated.
All right.
But if you
Somebody-
announced it as delay
Right.
5, and they
So-
actually played it silently.
The organizer chooses its game 25 delay 5. If the player decides to show up with an analog clock so he doesn't get the delay, yes, it's still dual rated.
Yes.
But if you advertise it as 25 on analog clocks with delay 0, then it's not.
The standard kind of control, the standard clock for that game is a delay clock. Okay. If he chooses to use an analog clock, that's his problem.
Another way to put this is the announcement will apply to delay clocks. And if someone has an analog clock, the analogs have to use whatever was announced with the delay clock.
That's right.
Yes.
Set your clocks to 25 minutes, period. If you have a delay, set the delay to 5 seconds.
Set the analog clock with a delay 5.
Well,
If you can't, too bad.
If this were to, if we actually pass this one, what would it go like?
We'd have to give Mike time enough to program everything that needs to be programmed, probably around January.
January 1st is the traditional date.
That's a traditional date. Okay? And then you can pass the word to your players that this is happening.
Right.
Okay?
And possibly time to correct delays and stuff.
Yes, Bob?
Yeah, so getting back to what we talked about before, should the motion be amended to require the organizer to advertise
The delay time.
delay time?
I'm in favor of that. Some other people say, well, if you don't mention that's a standard, but the problem is that game 25. Game 25 sounds like a quick game if you don't mention what the
Yeah,
delay
I
is.
think we should require it.
Yeah, we should require
But
it.
maybe required if it's non-standard. Is that possible?
Well, but there's 2 different standards for game 25.
Right.
Okay? That's the problem.
Well, I mean, strictly speaking, G25 by itself would be quit. The standard would be 3.
That's
So I
right.
guess I would be saying, if you said G25 and you don't say anything about the delay. then
G25,
the
just
use
put
of-
it in. It's 3 more characters.
All
But he is correct. If an organizer screws up and advertises game 25,
Yeah.
then the players have
That's
the
quick chess.
right to assume that it's quick and that the delay will be 3 seconds.
Yes, that's correct.
So don't do that.
Mr. Just.
Call a question?
That's real nice if you have a TLA, folks. What if I want to run one of these and I just don't have a TLA?
You got to put a flyer or
Not a flyer, it's just, you know, everybody shows up at the club once a week and we pair who's there. And this is the week we decided to run, what we're going to do.
Well, how are you going to report it to the,
there's the key word.
Yes, how are you going to report it? And that's why the programming has to be done to require that you put in both the base time and the delay.
Well, I understand, but all I kept hearing was in the TLA. I didn't hear anything about people who don't do that. There are people who don't do that.
This is true. And whatever is reported is what's going to get rated.
There you go.
Yes.
I don't see why this really makes it more confusing to organizers and potential players as to what's going to be happening, especially, as you pointed out, there's no TLA. You come to the tournament, you don't really know what to expect, whether this is going to be, if you have a game 25 tournament, whether the TD is going to be putting on the 5 seconds and making it dual rated or not putting on the 5
I'm
seconds.
sorry. If you advertise game 25, the player should assume that it's 3 seconds.
Well, if you advertise game, I still could see a lot of potential confusion here with the words game 25.
Put D3 or D5 in and you won't have any confusion.
Right. I don't agree that you won't have any confusion. I think you will.
If you want any confusion, clarification and then maybe a comment. When you're talking about a requirement to put in the D3 or D5, you're only talking about control where there's a question, right? You're not saying that 40 and 2 has to have an explanation.
No, it shouldn't need it.
Okay, now.
Well, actually, unless it's different from normal. Yeah, I agree.
All right, so if it's something different than the standard, there would have to be an explanation.
Yeah.
I'm just a little concerned that the office might be flooded with non-conforming TLAs and have a problem of having to contact organizers and saying, this TLA doesn't say.
Right, that's what I was suggesting.
Yeah, I'd rather have something automatic.
If it's not standard, then it needs to be announced in advance.
Yes, all the corner cases are with primary control is 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. Those are the only ones. So if you run events, if you run events that are 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, then you better advertise the delay. Otherwise, not necessary.
All right, so we'll just have probably this introductory period when a lot of things will be received at, say, game 30, and if the office has time, they might contact some of these organizers and say, is that really what you mean?
Game 30 isn't a problem at all.
Yeah, but some of those organizers are intending game 25 plus 5.
Unfortunately, the good news is with this proposal, they're both the same. They're both dual rated.
They can take 5
And
seconds.
what you just have is a typographical error that had no effect.
They're both rated the same.
They're both rated the same.
But what if they don't have time to play game 30 plus 5?
Then they'll play game 25 plus 5, and that's what they meant when they advertised game 30.
Yeah, well, I mean, they'll learn eventually.
Yeah,
It's just
so-
that
so
there'll be a break-in period.
Yeah, there always is.
All right. I guess the question is, will this be a formal amendment to the motion that's actually?
What amendment?
The
is it?
requirement
To
to
require the
add-
delay. Yeah, it's a friendly.
You must-
It's a friendly amendment.
How about organizers are encouraged to explicitly list the delay
Okay.
rather than required? I mean, what's the penalty if they don't?
It's how they reported is how it's going to get rated anyway.
No. Right.
But how the TD reports it and how the player thinks it's getting reported may very well not be the same.
Well, then the player will get on the organizer.
Then the
Well, after
organizer
the
should work on
damage
its
is done, so I don't know if
communications.
that you can just dismiss it, like, so trivially. Well, of course you can, but I mean, I don't know if you should dismiss it so trivially.
So Steve, you're saying that it should always, the delay should always be announced, whether even if it's standard?
I think at least initially, there should be, it should be quite clear what you do.
If there's any questions, Steve, in your tournaments, you could just say
I'm not talking about
dual
it.
rated. You just put dual in your advertising? No?
No, specify the delay.
Specify the
We
delay.
don't
And
want-
specify the delay.
We don't want organizers thinking they can choose whether it's dual rated or
No,
not.
right. Okay, but specify the delay, and I think that will, okay, and if you want further clarification, you could state dual rated in your advertising.
Actually, the office has a TLA symbol for quick chess. It's QC for tournaments. It's automatically in there, even if, you know, your tournament is obvious. You have a game in 5, and the TLA still says parentheses QC. So it might be that there could be a symbol DR put in.
There you go.
Maybe it should be part of the procedure then for dual rated
Okay.
tournaments. So if you're running game 25,
For your
it should
online
be
TLA.
DR. For your online, no, for your chess like TLA.
Yeah,
So-
okay. Yeah, I mean, that's, whatever needs to be done to make it clear, we'll do it. Okay. The committee voted 4-0 in favor with 1 abstention. So that's where we were at there. All those in favor here? $14. All those opposed? 0. Abstentions? 1. I didn't see your hand up the first time. Okay. All right. Do you think that this really takes care of your concerns for ADM 1137?
Not necessarily, because the situation, well, I don't think it covers, I'm not sure if the amendment that you just passed, the amendment, it covers the specific cases of the truth in advertising. But in my motion, I wanted to make it clear that deducting making the deduction is considered to be a major variation, so that players, unless otherwise so warned, when they come to a tournament, they actually expect the standard to be no deduction, and the onus is on the organizer to say the deduction is going to be in place, so that no player can come to a tournament. I would never have shown up here if I knew there was going to be 5 minutes taken off.
Okay.
That was one concern that I put in, which, by the way, was motivated by apparently a lot of flack from previous years about the so-called truth in advertising.
Yes.
Players being misled. So that was the motivation.
And that was the motivation, and that's what we were trying to get rid
We're
of.
trying to cure it. Because under the motion we just approved, there is no such thing as deduction anymore. There is no deduction, period.
It
So
doesn't
there can't
have,
be any confusion about whether there will be a deduction or not, because there will be no deduction, period.
and to be implemented on January 1st of next year. That's already been moved and approved by the Board of Delegates. Now, your motion seems to reinstating the deduction. Appears that way.
Yeah, I think that's correct. In the
And
situation
then
we have
stating,
mixed clocks.
and then stating 2 time controls for an event.
I'm sorry, say what?
And then advertising 2 time controls for an event.
Right.
To me, that's extremely confusing.
It is confusing?
Yeah.
Well, other than, if you're going to have, unless you're going to outlaw 2 different types of clocks in the same event, you're going to say this event shall only be using analogs and no delay, or this clock shall only be using digital. But in my experience, it's quite common to have 2 different kinds of clocks in the same event, even though most of the clocks are now digital with delay.
Yeah,
There's still,
and you can still advertise that in your TLA if you wish. I don't think it should be
The
required.
rule that you just passed said that if you got game 25 with delay 5, it's going to be dual rated, and if you're going to show up with an analog clock, it's going to play 25 minutes.
And unless you advertise otherwise.
Right. I mean, that's what the group just said they wanted to do.
Yeah.
or you can make the argument that you're proceeding down the road to tournament rating debauchery here by having game 25 with an analog clock being rated under the regular rating system. I think there might be significant opposition to having, to going anything faster under a regular clock and being regular rated. Game 30 was like the sort of the traditional demarcation between real chess and
Any
unreal
player
chess.
who shows up with a dime delay clock at a tournament which is advertised as game 25, delay 5, is entitled to use the delay and is entitled to play at 30 minutes.
Right, of course, but if somebody shows up with an old-fashioned clock and that's all they both
The
have.
standard timer for a delay tournament is a delay clock. For a sudden death tournament is a delay clock. Okay, Ken.
I I readily accept that I am getting older and crankier, but I will make a very clear statement. I want the situation where, in a sudden death time control, an analog clock has more time on it than a digital clock to end.
And so you won't show up at Steve's tournament because he's advertising 2 time controls for the 2 different clocks.
Correct.
Okay. And that's your choice as a player.
But you wouldn't show up at this tournament either.
It is my choice as a player.
No, they're not deducting 5 minutes
There's
from
no
this.
deduction in this tournament.
No, on the USCF, the rule you just passed, you wouldn't show up either because that would be game 25, which is the same time control as the analog clock. I mean, it's a delay clock. There's no delay.
I disagree.
You would show up at a tournament where game 25 with 5-second delay, but you wouldn't show up at a tournament with game 25 with no delay, even though you must have more time on the analog.
That's not what you said.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that when you advertise the time control of game 30 or game 25 with 5 seconds delay for digital clock, what that means is you are penalizing the player
With the standard equipment.
You are putting more time on the analog clock.
Very few of my games go 60 moves.
Right.
The person with the analog clock has the analog clock user has an advantage over me.
In addition, wait a minute.
time.
In addition, Steve,
Sorry.
in addition, when you have multiple time controls, the first time control is 40 moves in something. It is inarguable that the player with the delay clock gets less time for the 40 moves than the player with the analog clock when you type the 5 minutes away. And that's because in the 40 moves, you will recover 3 minutes and 20 seconds of delay time. You are absolutely penalizing the player with the maximum. You are absolutely penalizing the player with the standard equipment. In fact, what the rule book would consider the preferred equipment. I find that unacceptable.
Agreed.
Yes. Okay. Yes, Mike.
What I would like to suggest is that this could probably be resolved by adding a short sentence or two to the rule book which says, time controls will be advertised for USCF standard clock, e.g. increment delay capable clocks. Adjustments to non-increment delay capable clocks are stated below, and then deal with that. And basically that is, if it's game 25 plus 5, you just get game 25.
You're done because there will be no adjustments for non-standard clocks.
Okay, fine. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
Okay, but anyway, Steve Emmett's motion on ADM 1137, if you have your delegates called with you.
No,
very
if you
long
have
motion.
if you have an open clock, there is a rule to cover it.
Okay. Variation 5FA. The variation 5FA, by the way, was voted down by the delegate, was removed by the delegates at the last delegates meeting to be implemented January 1st, 2012. Okay. It was first passed to be implemented on January 1st, 2011. Then it was reconsidered, and the implementation was delayed in order for us to work on the wording of the previous motion. Okay. The tournament director has the right to shorten the basic time control up to the number of minutes equal to the time delay used in seconds, example, time delay, etc. So basically the same wording as it is now. Maybe start at 25 minutes or 29 minutes and still be dual rated, game 30, and game 10 with a 3-second time delay. Maybe set starting at 7 minutes through 9 minutes. A notation shall be used in any chess live TLAs and other advanced publicity to denote this deduction. It lists both time controls. To indicate that the time control for that tournament is game 30 with an analog clock and game 25 with a time delay clock. And any TLAs and advanced publicity for tournaments using this variation must indicate the time control and time delay for clocks using time delay. In order to have tournaments rated in the regular rating system, the minimum basic time control must be at least 30 minutes for clocks not using time delay, and at least 25 minutes for clocks using time delay. And the minimum amount of time delay each move must be at least 5 seconds. Okay, this is completely incompatible with the previous motion that we just passed.
Call the question.
So, then he's got almost a half a page of explanation. More than half a page of explanation. Okay, all those in favor of this? All those opposed? One to 16. The committee, when they voted, said 2 to 3. I would like you to withdraw the motion if you would, Steve, please. But
Assuming the other one passes.
assuming the other one passes. Okay. This might be an alternative if the other one does not pass. All right, ADM 1138, Steve Emmett. The delegates resolve that the following language be added to the end of Rule 11H1. Director is witness only. This variation does not need to be announced in advance. And 11H1 is concerning illegal moves, where the director is allowed to interfere in a game if he witnesses an illegal move. Okay, that's still there. Just adding those words is then allowable. I have no objection with that. Added addition of the wording, and the committee vote was on this. I think it was 4 to 1 in favor. Oh, it's actually 5-0 in favor now. Okay. Any comments? Any questions? Okay, all in favor? 15. All opposed? 0. So we agree with you sometimes, Steve. Okay. ADM 1139, Steve Emmett. The delegates resolve that Rule 25 be added to the USCF section Rules of Play of the USCF Rule Book. Changes or amendments to USCF section Rules of Play. Any changes to the USCF rules listed in Chapter 1 of the USCF Rule Book and any subsequent renumbering thereof shall be require an approval of a majority of the delegates on 2 consecutive delegates meetings, or the approval of at least 2/3 of the delegates at any single delegates meeting. Once enacted, the changes or amendments or rescissions to this rule are subject to the same restrictions. We had quite a bit of discussion with regards to this within the committee, at least within some of the committee members, I should say, not the entire committee, because most of it took place here. We're in favor of the intent of the rule. What we would like to do is strike the two consecutive meetings and require 2/3, period. Is that agreeable?
You mean 2/3 of any meeting?
Any motion. Any rules change. So making it tougher than you had.
Yeah, it sounds like it makes it tougher to change the rule.
Yeah, it would make it tougher to change the rules.
The only question...
It's even tougher to change a rule in a bylaw.
Right, I was going to ask about that. Does this, in fact, make this... I wasn't sure when I was writing that this was actually allowed to be done, because it almost sounds like this might be a bylaw.
Well, there's another motion, almost identical,
yeah,
that asks to be making a bylaw, but we might not ask, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about that when we come to it. That's next, I believe. Okay.
It's actually way before this, because ADM 1140 is the same as ADM 1121.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay.
So we're actually going to deal
Our
with...
discussion was, within the committee, the consensus is that make it 2/3.
And we don't think it needs to be a bylaw.
We don't think it needs to be done.
There is a situation where if the delegates had a mind to do it, they could do something that everyone would consider to be completely slimy and get around it, but they already can do completely slimy things anyway.
My point is that we've got to, in the meeting on Saturday, we've got to recognize that we're going to deal with I mean, we talked about that in the bylaws committee, because it's a bylaws suggestion too.
Unless
The maker of the motion.
That's my point.
The
Yeah,
maker
you're
of the
there.
motion might.
We're all in the same place. Okay.
Yes, the maker of the motion for the bylaws amendment is withdrawing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that right?
Or modifying it, right?
We're modifying
Striking the bylaw.
But moving it to rules and forgetting about it as a bylaw.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So I want to clarify, one of the people in the bylaws discussion, Mike Nolan, thought it had to be a bylaw. I want to make sure, I just want to talk to him to make sure he understands that he, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. And a bylaw seems to have a little more power than a delegate's motion of continuing interest.
So
Of course, it only takes a majority to change a bylaw.
If it's in advance, right. So, you know, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with the idea it's just a DACI, and would accept that as a friendly motion. I just want to make sure, I just want to check with our parliamentarian to make sure there isn't an issue.
The whole point here is to project the expectation that we're not going to change the rules until we reach huge consensus.
Right.
Yes, Ken.
If we go with this, 2/3, I mean, reconstruct what happened last year. We had a nice little rule that was, you know, came out of this little discussion, and the late John Hillary got up and went and split the sucker.
Yes.
All right? For better or worse, he split the sucker. Does the 2/3 now apply to each split portion?
Yes.
Absolutely. We're each a different change in the rules.
Okay, I just wanted to check.
That's the whole point of making it. It's all.
No, you only need 1/3 for each.
I like your math.
You split it 6 ways, hey, you know.
6 votes does it. Yes, Bob.
Would this change take effect starting in next year's delegates?
Yes.
Is that being the motion?
Uh,
Because otherwise it might take effect as soon as it
Well, no, it would take effect after the delegates meeting was over.
Right.
Yeah.
Which effectively.
Well, if there's a special delegates meeting called, for example, it would be in effect then.
And that would be the next delegates meeting.
Would it take 2/3 to split it?
No.
No.
No,
No.
it doesn't take 2/3 to split a bylaws amendment now.
I mean, that's just a procedural call, you know, on the.
Hey, I'm trying to circumvent the thing to get ahead of the people who are going to circumvent the thing.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the main reason we wanted to not have in there the out of saying it only requires a majority if you announce it in advance. Notice it no longer matters whether it's in the advance agenda or not. Whether it's in the advance agenda or not, this says 2/3.
I understand.
You were the only one opposed to this. Do you want to change the vote?
Yeah.
Okay, 5-0.
Now
5-0 for the
now
vote.
it's 2/3 across the board.
Yeah.
Because I really thought that should have been split. I thought that's 2 different motions, and that's why I opposed it.
Aha. Okay. ADM 1140 basically is almost the same thing.
Well, we haven't taken a vote of 39.
Well, we can vote on both of them at the same time, because they're both going to end up to be the same thing.
Right.
Okay.
As a pass one, subtract the others.
Yeah. The USCF Federation official rules may be modified by a majority vote of the delegates at a special delegates meeting or a special delegates meeting, except that any proposal not specifically included in the delegates call, we're striking that phrase in the advanced agenda. Okay.
Basically.
It may be modified, shall require a 2/3 majority vote to pass.
Right.
Okay.
So maybe
Now both of these motions say the same thing.
With the exception is right now I'm amending the bylaws, so you're going to start.
Well, actually, Steve's limits it to chapter 1, the laws of chess.
Okay.
Okay, yours doesn't.
Should it really go under the motions of continuing interest, the DACI?
Yeah, it will go under a DACI then. Okay.
We'll talk about DACI.
Yeah. And Steve's motion limits it to chapter 1. Is that okay with you?
Remind me again, chapter 1, basically the intent of this was.
Is the rules.
Is the rules.
Is the rules.
Not the other junk that's in there.
That's correct.
Well, in particular, it is not the pairing rules, which I think there's a huge part, which is pairing rules.
I would say that if you pass in any of these, the pairing rules would be equally effective.
Should be. I would say
It should be too.
On the other hand, there's things in that book that we probably change administratively without talking to the delegates at all.
This is
It's
true.
just informational stuff in the book. But I don't think we really should refer to pieces of the vote.
Yeah, no, the intent of my motion was anything to be classified as a rule as in.
Yeah, yeah. And so from Steve's, we'll strike chapter 1, rules in general.
So
Okay.
what would that include that it doesn't include now? It would include?
Well, it includes things that are governed, okay? The laws of chess in chapter 1, the pairing rules in chapter 2, probably the notation rules in chapter 3. I don't have the rule book totally memorized yet, okay? But where specifically you're at a tournament, and you point to a rule and say, this is the rule.
Right.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Of making it 2/3 across.
Of making it 2/3 flat.
I hope we have 2/3.
17.
Which brings up an interesting
Opposed?
point.
1.
Will the 6th edition require 2/3 of the delegates to approve it?
To approve the rule book.
We have, we have
Now we'll.
a vote of 17 to 1. That's 2/3. Okay, ADM 1141. Steve Emmett.
Give it to you next month.
I'm kind of mixed on this one. Right of all players to furnish and use a time delay clock. Delegates approve changing Rule 42D. That's on equipment, I believe. Okay, 42D. Yeah, standard clocks. Delay clock preferable in sudden death. Properly set clock with the time delay capability is preferred to any other clock in a game with any sudden death time control. Therefore, if white has such a clock available and black does not, white's clock should be used. If either player arrives late for the start of the game and a clock without time delay has already been started, the player has the right to furnish and substitute a properly set time delay clock before he has completed his first move. The player substituting the time delay clock must also transfer the elapsed time shown on the non-delay clock to the delay clock without any additional adjustments, except to correct any errors in the display of the elapsed time. The player substituting the delay clock must have arrived at the board before the grace period for forfeit loss of the game by non-appearance has expired. Notwithstanding the above, the only occasions where black retains the right to use his or her own non-time delay clock are in games where no sudden death time control, cases where both players have same type of non-time delay clock, or if the delay mode were not being used in a sudden death time control game, and if, in all these cases, black has arrived in time for the start of the game where white is late, or if white is late before white has arrived. In any particular game, if the delay clock cannot be properly set, then the opponent of the player providing the delay clock may choose which legal clock to be used. Now, a lot of this is already in the rule, but basically what this is doing is, I'm late, I'm black, 15 minutes to my game, okay? I come up, I have a time delay clock, but there's an analog clock running on it already. I subtract 15 minutes from my time, set the time delay, put it on the clock, and put my clock on the board. That's what this is allowing. Okay. Yes, Tim?
That sounds good, but how come, maybe it takes you 15 minutes to set your clock because you're a bozo. What do you do about that 15 minutes?
And I am a bozo because it will take me 15 minutes to set.
Oh, it'll take me even longer. You know.
Get the TV to do it.
The more likely scenario is I want to use my delay clock service to heat up heroin.
I guess the real question is, what do we want to define? And I really don't care what it is, I just want to make sure we all agree. What do we want to define as the elapsed time? You know, how late are you if you want to make the substitution? If the guy takes 10 or 15 minutes to set his clock,
and it's
highly unlikely. I mean, we're 10 or 15 minutes behind all of a sudden.
Yes, and or his time expires.
You know, or the guy shows up and says, you know what, I'm going to take 10 minutes to go find one of those clocks for my friend before I sit down to play. But he did show up. Now,
Clock's got to be ready.
you know, it's a gray area. I don't have an answer. I'm just asking the question. Where do we want to draw the line?
I draw the line that it should show up on
Yeah, I
time.
have a little different thing, but I can try to reply to that too. we're dealing, this only deals with delay, and it doesn't deal with increment. And
Well, okay, we'll add the word
well,
or
we have to
increment.
add the word increment, because.
We'll add the word or increment where appropriate.
Yeah, now the other, that associated with increment is 30 seconds.
Yes.
Because you have and FIDE does not like to have a section or graded that has two different time controls. If you have an analog clock, it's a different time control from a clock using a 30-second increment. It's a different time control.
But FIDE rules doesn't allow people to be late in the first place.
That's not true. That's not true at all.
Okay?
That's not
They
true.
prefer it.
All right.
I mean, it depends on what your default is.
Yeah.
That's their default on a major tournament, but you can say whatever you want, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is.
Right, okay.
So in other words, first I said no about this. I didn't like the idea. I said, we need 2/3. This is a major change.
Yes.
First I said, really didn't like this idea at all. But if we're going to be dealing more and more with increment time controls, where it's a 30-second increment.
Which we are going to be
major
dealing with.
change in the time control.
Mhm.
I think if somebody sits down there with white sits down with an analog clock and black comes in 15 minutes later with an increment clock, I think that we should really have to change that clock to an
In fact, we should need to change the clock. That's what
What?
you're saying. You should be required to change the
Yeah,
clock. is what
yeah, it
you're
should
saying.
be required to change it.
Okay.
And if it takes 5 minutes to change it, that should be added on to the big list.
Yeah.
Okay, well, did you want, you pointed to me, you're pointing to me.
And you, the guy in front.
The guy in front.
That was clear.
Relatively in front.
Directly in front.
But yes. First of all, color shouldn't matter. And if someone has an analog clock and white has, if black has an analog clock in the game, you're going to pass it slow, and white should be able to substitute it easily
Yeah.
as well. And I think that's what the rule actually says.
I think that's what it's intended.
Right, I mean, the standard rule, of course, has been once the game starts, you're stuck with whatever equipment is there, essentially, unless it's something totally out of the standard. The only reason I'm kind of hedging on this is because I suspect that's what's going to happen is someone's going to show up with the clock, Tim's scenario is, Louis going to hand it to TD and say, here's my delay clock, or here's my increment clock, you set it to TD, because I haven't got a clue how to do this.
Then it's an analog clock.
I assume that under this change, the TD can basically say, no, you're going to play with that, right? And in other words, you have to set your own clock.
Yeah, you have to know how to set your own clock. That's in the rules.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay. One of the provisions of this says that that the substitution has to be made before he completes his first move. Then later it says, one of